Where Creatures Hide, written by P.J. Shepherd, narrated by P.J. Shepherd. Chapter 1, Eden. A seeker found a frozen orb with a creature trapped inside. Dr. Oberon, the profound CEO of Eden, smiled. His frosty white hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail. His grey, aged skin sunk in around his black eyes, which glared at Alex. I want you to look into it. Those were the words that rung through Alex's ears as he stood in the glacial chamber. A frozen orb perched on a metal pillar in the centre of the room, the way a Grecian statue would, except it wasn't a Grecian statue. Inside the frozen orb was a girl, long brown hair askew. A pink corset was wrapped around her waist, which travelled down the front of her body in a V shape. Pink tulle puffed out at her sides, which made the ice shimmer in colour. Ripped strips of material clutched onto her arms. She was hypnotic. Her body shape was like an hourglass, her skin fair but golden. She was beautiful and magnetic, but what was even more wondrous was the blood that stained her mouth, neck, and cheeks. Alex glanced over his shoulder towards Dr. Phoebe and nodded. Start the defrost process. Yes, sir. Alex's British accent was stronger than the one of Dr. Phoebe, even though he had lived in New Zealand for many years. She bowed and sauntered behind a silver desk filled with command buttons. Her slender fingers hovered over a red button. They trembled, and she hesitated. Dr. Phoebe shook her head and pressed the button, then stepped away from the control panel. Machines hummed, and the ice began to groan as it melted. This was a bad idea, like the calm before a storm. But it was too late now. The damage was done. Water dripped onto the ground and began to sink into the drains that surrounded the orb. Large chunks of ice smashed onto the ground. Doctors, guards, and scientists screamed and huddled together as the ice slid towards them. The machine started to chime an alarm. Sir, she's not stable. Her vitals are failing, Dr. Phoebe yelled. Then turn it off! Stop it now! Alex roared. But it was too late. The air touched the girl's fingers and a light appeared which was so bright it threatened to blind those in the room. Alex covered his eyes with his hands. All went quiet. Not a single beat from the machine sounded. The orb glowed and pulsated like the beat of a heart. A soft hum filled the room. It was gentle and warm. The light that pulsated from the ice brightened, and the soft hum turned into a high-pitched scream. Like thunderbolts that cracked against the earth, ice exploded off her body like hot glass. Shattered pieces pierced the doctors, including Dr. Phoebe. Bodies blasted onto walls, thrown in a ragdoll manner. It never touched Alex, as if a force field had shielded him from harm. He covered his eyes from the bright light. His heart pounded in his ears. His legs trembled as the light intensified, before it disappeared into oblivion. Alex's face prickled with numbness as his muscles tensed and froze. What was that? Alex breathed in before he twisted on the tips of his feet. He made his way towards the girl, who was now in an icy pool of water. She lay in a fetal position, motionless and utterly tranquil. He was the only survivor. How was he to explain this to Dr. Oberon? The smell of copper wafted through the room. Alex knew it wasn't copper at all, but blood. He didn't dare glimpse at the death that spread through the chamber. There was death in Eden every day, but none like this. Alex bent to one knee, then reached for the girl's wrist to check for a pulse. Faint, and hardly there, were 2 small beats. The skin where Alex's fingers pressed turned to skin that dripped with tar. What the... The girl clutched onto his arm and crushed the bones in his wrists one by one. She lifted herself towards him. Her eyes changed from brown to red in seconds, and she screamed in his face. Alex tugged on his arm to free it from her grip, but she was strong. She forced it still and clasped it in hers. Tar dripped on the sleeve of his suit where she held. But as fast as she changed, the faster she turned back. The fair colour of skin came back, and the red in her eyes vanished and left a deep brown haze of exhaustion. The girl collapsed in his arms. Her head fell against his chest in a wet heap, and her legs sprawled on the ground below, Finally, Alex glanced around the room. Bodies littered the floor, and pools of blood sunk into the drains nearest the host. A muffled voice came from the Silverline radio, though Alex couldn't make out what it said. Wetness trickled down his ear. He brought his fingers to it. It was cold. Confused, Alex pulled his hand back and watched blood drip down until it sunk into the sleeve of his suit. He would usually pay no mind. It was blood after all. But his was black, and if someone else spotted it, they would imprison him like the rest of them. The radio buzzed again. "Mr. Samael, are you okay in there?" Alex pulled a handkerchief from his inside pocket and wiped his ears clean. The radio buzzed again. "Mr. Samael, are you okay in there? Do you require sitters?" Alex shuddered. Sitters, Class 1 workers. They transported creatures to and from room to room. Cleaners of the dead and the living. Even though it was 2017 and he had worked in the famed Institute of Eden for a few years, sitters still chilled him to the bone, though he couldn't put his finger to why. Alex held on to the girl with his broken hand, her brown hair already dried despite the cold of the chamber, and her skin warmed though she just woke from ice. Whatever power she contained was deadly, and for a second, Alex thought that that might be the reason she was in ice in the first place. Maybe she wasn't trapped. Maybe she was imprisoned. Sharp pain shot through his arm. It twitched as the bones clicked back into place one by one. His ability to mend broken bones came in handy, but not while he was in the confines of Eden. He wheeled them back into place. Each one moved and clicked back into its holding. Once healed, Alex reached for the radio. "Send in the sitters. She's ready."